Welcome back to the Modern Challenges of Extraterrestrial Hypothesis Conference, Roswell, New Mexico's 70th anniversary. It's a pleasure to once again welcome up Dr. Michael Heiser. This is his fifth talk that he's prepared for this event, and it's been many years since he was here. 2009, he did one great talk at our Christian Symposium called Why an Extraterrestrial God Appeals to Today's Culture. And I think today's is reminding me of, from a flip side perspective, he's going to bring us science fiction televangelism for ET religion and see how the mindset of this alien phenomena is really getting into people's heads and creating new belief systems. That's a recurring theme in this conference as well. I look forward to seeing Dr. Heiser and Mike drive this one home. Welcome them up, please. Thank you.
I'm a bit tethered this time, so hopefully I won't bring down and be with me. Thanks for coming. In the annual academic meetings every November, everyone who submits a paper hopes that they're not selected to deliver a paper on Tuesday mornings after everyone has gone. I have been in that spot once, and this is actually a better attendance than I had at the annual meeting. So I know how it is, but thanks for coming. I know it's late in the week, and everybody's thinking about going home, getting back to normal. This talk is sort of self-explanatory in one sense. Science fiction televangelism for ET religion. What I want to do is I want to overview sort of how science fiction writers and, of course, media like film and a little bit of television have been vehicles to articulate a theology, okay? And specifically a theology of the extraterrestrial as sort of displacing or replacing traditional theism, and in some cases traditional Judeo-Christian worldview, Judeo-Christian theology. I have to confess that the real authority on ET stuff in Hollywood is not me, it's Robbie Graham. And so I want to give him a shout out. You should all go get his Silver Screen Saucers book. It's an excellent work, lots of detail. This is going to be sort of an overview with a theological twist to it. And for the sake of I think at least half the audience probably are going to be someone who would be a traditional theist or a Christian perhaps. So I want to, again, just provoke your thought a little bit in terms of what the kind of things that we like to watch. Slide. It's not working. Yeah. It looks like there you go. Let's talk first about elements of what I will loosely refer to here as the extraterrestrial gospel. We have generally sort of new myths in place of old creeds. New myths in place of old creeds. I want to start off with a few quotations from, I think, in some cases will be well-known sources, and other sources I think are pretty important here. There is today the time when old beliefs are withering, a kind of philosophical hunger. You need to know who we are and how we got here. There's an ongoing search, often unconscious, for a cosmic perspective for humanity. As I know in the bottom, that was Carl Sagan, way back in 1973. But, honestly, it could have been yesterday. This is just sort of the way things are. Again, this philosophical hunger, I would say a spiritual hunger. Most people don't think consciously about theologies, but I can say a theological hunger as well. And for those of you who are Christians, the New Testament, specifically Paul in Romans 1, again, my paraphrasing his language, it talks about how every human heart sort of has a God-shaped void in it, and wants to fill it with something transcendent. Who are we? How did we get here? Who knows? That sort of thing. And this is what Sagan is really sort of striking at here. Ray Kurzweil, when the singularity is near, says we need a new religion. Now, again, he's specifically talking about transhumanism, but transhumanism is going to be a theme in science fiction, and in some cases, a theme linked to extraterrestrial realities as they're cast in science fiction. The search for superior beings, the quest for extraterrestrial intelligence is itself a kind of religion. Yeah, I would wholeheartedly agree. This is Stephen Dick, who is a historian of the extraterrestrial life conversation. In his book, Life on Other Worlds, the 20th Century Extraterrestrial Life Debate, which is a 1998 title. Dick has authored a number of books on the history of the extraterrestrial possibility, both in terms of broader Western civilization and also specifically within the church, and broadly speaking, church historical discussion. And he's right. The search for superior beings, think about it, which of course is related intimately to, and you can almost make it the synonym, the quest for extraterrestrial intelligence is in itself a kind of religion. This will be an extended quote. There is an emerging canon. Again, for those of us who are Christians, C-A-N-O-N is a significant word. Canon refers to the body of sacred literature, that which is considered inspired. There is an emerging canon of transcendent stories that provides meaning to our lives, the myth-making work of two powerful engines of cultural influence. Speculative science, and yes, science can be speculative, and even though scientists don't like to talk in those terms, it certainly is in many respects. Speculative science and the works of science fiction, presented to us as a much-needed alternative to more traditional perspectives of God, people, and the destiny of the human race, an alternative that will open a spiritual pathway into the increasingly technological future. Another way of saying that is this, as he puts it, the emerging canon, again, these engines of cultural influence, are preparing us for our destiny, at least as we perceive it, as many perceive it, in a technological society context. This is from James Herrick's book, Scientific Mythologies, How Science and Science Fiction Forge New Religious Beliefs. This is an excellent book. This is InterVarsity Press. I think I have a picture here, yeah. Jim Herrick is a professor of, well, what's his field? He's not a scientist or a religion scholar, but he's a professor of rhetoric. He's in the Reformed tradition, for those Christians in the audience. He's a good guy. I've met him, talked to him a number of times. This is an excellent book. He's written other books as well that I would certainly recommend with our subject matter today. This is an excellent volume. So specific elements, moving from generalities to some specific theological tenets or theological ideas. E.T. theism. And just think about that term, E.T. theism. It's not really an oxymoron for many. New gods for a technological post-Christian age. Once life has started in a relatively benign environment and billions of years of evolutionary time available, the expectation of many of us is that intelligent beings will develop. From Carl Sagan, different source this time, Dragons of Eden, speculations on the evolution of human intelligence. By the end of the 19th century, the myth of the intelligent, spiritual, and benevolent ET was entrenched in Western thought. I want to comment on that. I've cut out a number of points about sort of the history of, are there other worlds that can be traced again all the way back to the Church Fathers. This statement, again, has a lot behind it. In the Middle Ages, to say generalities here, Middle Ages, the church was very positively predisposed to the idea of there being other worlds. As I mentioned yesterday, which talked about this, but there was a time when it was considered theologically aberrant to deny God's ability and the possibility that other worlds can exist, because you can't say that God couldn't do something, because that's just not theologically permissible within the bounds of omnipotence. Of course God can do something. So if you deny that there were other worlds, you're sort of perceived as denying some point of omnipotence. So something that God could do. Well, that was the church. And broadly speaking, as you go through the early modern period, up into the modern period, you have a number of writers speculating, and typically in terms of fiction. We didn't really have the term science fiction at this point. But in terms of fiction, they were proposing and writing about other worlds. The most familiar audience, I think, the most familiar instance of this for Christians would not be something in the 19th century, be something in the 20th century, like C.S. Lewis's trilogy, On the Silent Planet, Erlander, and Hades Stone. Well, there were writers before Lewis writing what we would later call science fiction and selling a good number of books. This was a popular, and by the end of the 19th century, a familiar idea. And it included, think it's fair to say probably, in the 18th century sometime, you would have had the first book that talked about alien visitation to this world. So in other words, the question wasn't are there other worlds, but Fontenelle has a book specifically about this idea that there were visitors from other worlds that came here, rather than later science fiction, we go visit other worlds and you can see us versus the silent planet. So both ideas were, again, in the intellectual culture, in the literate culture, those people who read books from the end of the 19th century. By the end of the 20th, ET visitation and the displacement of theism, either current theism, how people thought about God in the 20th century, or the idea that the gods in antiquity were actually extraterrestrials, those ideas were also entrenched in Western thought. And again, this is kind of obvious for those of you who are here at this conference. All I need to do is mention Zechariah Sitchin and Earth Chronicles, Eric Von Daniken. Again, that's not going away. It's firmly entrenched where we feel today. Now, you also have, again, to bolster, or I shouldn't say bolster, but to reinforce maybe, or kind of operate in the background to help convince people of the idea. You have official sources. Again, a lot of this stuff was talked about this week. The military, NASA, wondering about UFOs. Well, when people see, really smart people in the government, which you have like a government label or a military job or part of the intelligence community, you're perceived as being easily know. And so when you're wondering about extraterrestrial life, when you're speculating that, oh yeah, it's out there or it's already been here, that reinforces what you're reading in science fiction. It just does that for people. It lends validity to an idea. You might have been here reading fiction or books like Daniken, sort of completely nonfiction, but kind of get poo-pooed and ridiculed. But when official people, start talking about the same thing, it makes it just sound more reasonable. Unofficial sources, of course, more science fiction writers, filmmakers. Film is, I think, is arguably even more influential today than science fiction books. So they often remain the same. But again, where we're at, this idea, both of these ideas, that maybe the gods of antiquity, or God as we think of him today, is that really the being that religious books tell us who it is, like the Bible? Maybe God is an extraterrestrial, or the gods of other cultures, those are extraterrestrials. In other words, we don't have, it's foolish or not. The conversation isn't owned by people who talk about a spiritual world, God, angels, demons, that sort of thing. The conversation is now at least equally represented by those who would say, well, we don't really even think about a spiritual world, something distinct from the material world. We're talking about extraterrestrials, which are the part of the material world. The beings involved just like we are. And that sort of mental transition is kind of important. Here are a few of Dick's books. I just wanted to expose you to the titles here. Plurality of Worlds, Extraterrestrial Life Debate. There's a volume that precedes this one. This one is 1750 to 1900 by Michael Crum. Again, this is well-traveled turf in academia. This one is a little more recent. Jeffrey Bennett, Beyond UFOs, The Search for Extraterrestrial Life and the Astonishing Implications for Our Future. This is focused a lot on religious aspects, religious implications. This is another work by Stephen Dick, Eddie Wells. Alien Worlds, ET Culture, Contact with Alien Civilizations. All of these books and the ones that preceded are published by academic presses. That's why I wanted to list them here. These are not self-published. It's not, sort of kind of a popular press or something like Inner Traditions books that publishes even Zechariah Sitchin's material. These are all university press level publishers. And this is just a small sample. I don't want to say it all because I probably have missed something, but I have most of the academic literature published on this subject. There's a lot of it. And that doesn't even count journal literature, the religious angle, the religious implications of extraterrestrial life. Arthur C. Clarke, again, famously said, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And Michael Shermer, again, famous atheist, sort of stole that and said, any sufficiently advanced ETI, extraterrestrial intelligence, is indistinguishable from God. And if you really think about that, there's a lot of truth in that, because if we encountered an extraterrestrial, if there was some disclosure and it had astonishing technology, it's a really short leap for people to think, well, all those sort of miracles that you read about in the Bible and religious books, maybe they weren't miracles, maybe they were technology. Again, if you were confronted with this reality, and in many ways, we already have it in our heads very firmly because of science fiction. There are a lot of people today, if you get into a religious conversation with them, they're thinking, well, if there were ancient aliens, that's just technology. That's just parsed as being a miracle. It's parsed as being an act of God who's independent from creation. We're actually dealing with an extraterrestrial with this advanced technology. And this is nothing new, I think, for most in this Canadian audience, at least for this row. And I think Schirmer, his observation is on target. For a lot of people, they wouldn't even think about it. Wait a minute. Some of the stuff that, whether it's the Bible, something in the Eastern tradition, some of the stuff they describe really is beyond the technology they create. It's the easiest example. How do we attribute that to a manufactured technology by a finite life form, whether it's extraterrestrial or not? Well, a lot of people will not sort of probe the equation or just accept it. That, again, do we really need God and miracles if we have extraterrestrial life here with advanced technology? It's just easy to go there. And even though we don't have that today, as far as everybody really knows, the idea has been sort of beaten into our heads over and over and over again. So that it's just an easy thing to think about. It's an easy mental transition from one thing, terrestrial theism, to ET theism. These beings, this is saying again, are super civilization gods. These extraterrestrials that he's speculating about, motivated by benevolence. That also is a speculation, by the way. Then hundreds or thousands or millions of years beyond this, is that sciences and technology so far beyond their present capabilities as to be indistinguishable from magic. Again, he's also borrowing from this part there. Well, if we have ET theism, or at least the idea, sort of firmly planted in the Western mind by today, again, when I say firmly planted, I mean for a lot of people, the idea that there is no God, there's just an advanced extraterrestrial. That's on the table for a lot of people, even though we don't have any solid evidence that there are extraterrestrials. And as I lectured yesterday, there's a minority, but a significant representation in the scientific community that the odds of having an extraterrestrial life form that's intelligent really are not that good. Despite that, despite having no evidence, despite something like the Drake equation being entirely contrived, people just are still there. That is on the table for them without any evidence at all. And science fiction and mass media, again, visual forms of science fiction, have maybe not put that into the heads of Westerners, because that was done through the written word in the 18th and 20th century. But it certainly reinforces it, and a visual reinforcement becomes pretty powerful. But if we have the ET deity, ET theism, what is salvation? Well, extraterrestrial salvation is not about saving humans from sin. It's about saving humans from themselves. Okay? It's a little shift there. Humankind will remain vulnerable so long as it stays confined here on Earth. Martin Rees, Our Final Hours, a scientist warning of terror and environmental disaster, threaten humankind's future in this century on Earth and beyond. Rees' book basically advocates colonizing the United States because we're all going to hopelessly destroy ourselves. Now, again, don't be cynical about the global warming thing and how controversial that is. Rees is a mainstream scholar and scientist, and he's part of the significant number of people who believe our days are numbered for whatever reason. And so he wants to prove colonization. Well, wouldn't it be great if we could eat an extraterrestrial or to use extraterrestrial technology where the extraterrestrials would teach us how to pull this off, how to get to space, how to advance in our technology to save ourselves here or get out there. So that's the trajectory we're on. I really like this line again, not because I agree with it, because I think it's well said. Heaven, the purge of religion, is transformed into space. That's what it is. Because we already have this conception in terms of religion that, where does God live? He lives out there. He lives on the heavens, of course, beyond earth, that sort of thing. Well, that's where the aliens live too. So again, that helps solidify this analogy, this equation. And really, when you think about it, if you, again, either are an atheist or, again, you want to substitute, swap in an extraterrestrial, that's really well said. It's really what you have. Having Persian religions transformed into space. You're really talking about the same thing, except you don't have a deity. You have an extraterrestrial. These beings are going to save us from a newly redefined fallenness. Now, in traditional, again, Judeo-Christian thinking, humanity is fallen. Again, that means a number of things. We don't want to lapse into the theology lecture here. But fallenness is imperfection. It is not possessing in and of ourselves immortality. It is being estranged from the God who created us, again, because of sin, and so on and so forth. So it's a number of things. But in ET religion, again, and I hope you're catching the drift here, ET religion is this idea, again, that we shouldn't really be talking about God, or it makes less sense to talk about God than just to talk about fabulously transcendent extraterrestrial. If in that theology, well, it doesn't make any sense to have this thing called a sin or a stranger. What estranges us from ET is that we're not them. We're not as advanced. We're technologically astute. We're not as evolved spiritually or whatever. Although this vocabulary is kind of familiar. So we have to redefine what fallenness means. Humanity is not lost in sin, but humanity is in the primitive stages of biological, spiritual, and social evolution. Humanity in its present condition is a threat to itself. It must be saved by a greater intelligence. So salvation in this worldview, this religious worldview, religious framework, is a greater intelligence coming along and showing us the error of our ways, not in terms of mending a relationship between God and his creatures, his human creatures, but in terms of addressing our stupidity, okay, in terms of helping us to become more like our superiors, and to save ourselves from ourselves. That would be the definition of saving humanity. Humanity is the divine image. Its destiny is to become divine. In a panspermia worldview, the divine image means we are like our extraterrestrial brethren or creators. So we will talk a little bit about the term image of God. Now, it's very clear in Christian theology, biblical theology, that humankind is created in God's image. This is a great theological focus. Well, part of that, biblically speaking, is the beginning of it is associated with God creates a human family. He already has a divine family. He wants a human family as well. He creates a world where he can be among his embodied human creatures. On that world, he creates the garden. This is where he creates humanity. This is the beginning of God sort of blending his family, his human family with his divine family, and him living in the midst of all of his creatures, his intelligent children. This is the framework for the biblical story. And that's what God originally wanted and intended. God gives humans a mandate, says, Athena, you have lots of babies because I got a big job for you. It's bigger than two people. I want you to go out and subdue the earth. I want you to be a steward of this place, steward of kingship. I'm giving it to you. And I want you to multiply because your job is to spread Eden, essentially, all over the rest of the world. And so you need to multiply and do that. And God wants earth to be like a second home for himself and the other members of his divine family. He wants a blended family. So the biblical idea is God come to earth with human beings, and that should be the normal circumstance. We, as embodied beings, should think of it as normal, as God intended to live in God's realm, to be a member of the divine family, even though we are human and divine and embodied. That was the whole point of the early chapters of Genesis. We know again that doesn't work well. There's a fall, there's estrangement, there's expulsion from Eden and all of that. But the idea that humans are supposed to be members of a divine family is a biblical. That is a biblical idea. New Testament writers talk about it all the time. Christian theology is referred to as the end point of sanctification. It's referred to as glorification. It's referred to as theosis in the Eastern tradition, Eastern Orthodox. It's referred to as deification. The scholars like to use that term because they're like in this order. So the idea is a biblical one. Well, in a panspermia worldview where human life is a direct result of the seeding of the planet, seeding of Earth by intelligent extraterrestrials. In other words, they are our creators. In that view, the divine image means evolving to be like them. And this is a major theological tenet, a major theological trajectory in a lot of science fiction. Again, just this notion of we are here to help you become us. That we are your benevolent fathers, we're your benevolent creators. We're here to help you leap to the next stage of your evolution. And even in race evolution, you get this thread of contact. It's not recent, the arrival, there's a little bit of this in it. Again, some of the more thoughtful extraterrestrial movies. We're going to talk about movies here in a moment. But I mean, good grief, 2001. I mean, look at the imagery. I'll show you some pictures, some still shots for it. But that is theology 101. Yeah, maybe too fast here. ET, and again, it's speculated. ET evolution undoubtedly is propelled by science and technology, and so our evolution needs to be propelled by science and technology. Science and technology, again, I think it's fair to say that a lot of the human population here have already made science and technology their gods. But this pursuit of extraterrestrial contact, or at least, to overcome their technology or duplicate it. It's, for a lot of people, it's more than just, that'll give us bigger guns than the Soviet Union or something like that. For a lot of people, it's more transcendent. The goal is different. The goal is not conquest. The goal is becoming, again, superior. It's leaping forward in evolution. This is where a guy like Ray Kurzweil, again, his material, the whole transhumanist idea has become an important sort of ingredient in this theological mix, that it's our destiny to become more than human. And it just kicks that idea a little bit down the road of our minds and gets us ready for it, and gets us prepared for it, to endorse it, to want it. And so it's marketed really well, actually. So our own evolution has to follow the same path that ET will show us the way. Space is where humanity will meet its gods. Eventually, if we get out there and we get far enough, we'll make enough noise, and wherever we start colonizing it. Send probes here and there, or of course SETI, signal other possible intelligent races out there. Why do we do that? Well, it may not be verbalized, in some cases it is. And I've actually heard statements like this in academic meetings, that really are. But one of the reasons we want to do this is not just to know that there's other life forms. We want to meet our gods. We want to meet gods. Again, defined as beings that are so far superior to us that what else would we call them? I mean, what else would there be? We need to, again, achieve, we want to do this. We want to evolve sufficiently, and we hope that we can meet them and they can help us so that we can restore ourselves. We want to attain unlimited knowledge. We want to overcome human evil and stupidity. We want to transcend humanity itself. We want to be like they are. We want to be as gods. And it's really easy to put a theological spin on it. I think I have something about Peter Thielen here. I hope I included that. If not, I remember it well. I'd like to say a little bit more about him. Again, transhumanism is sort of the intersection of the technological master, extraterrestrial, the new ET God, and our destiny. While we're trying to meet our gods, we're going to do our best to become like them. We're going to do our best to transcend ourselves. We're going to do our best to become more than human. Because that's what they want to do. We want to be like them. We want to do what they do, be like them, because that way, we will be fulfilling our destiny as their images, their imagers. And we're not the image of a transcendent, invisible, separate from creation, beginning anymore. To be in the image of God, we advance ourselves so that we would be like them. Not like the symbolism of God, the Bible or something, to be like them. So we have this talk today about biological enhancement, genetic enhancement, uploading consciousness, synthetic biology, nanotechnology, of course, the singularity becomes spiritual machines. But we can just transfer our consciousness from machine form to machine form. Where is Thiel? Okay. Peter Thiel, I like to include this because Thiel his parents were Christians, missionaries, I believe, in the evangelical tradition. Peter Thiel was the founder of PayPal. There's lots of money. He's an enthusiastic transhumanist. Enthusiastic really is too weak of a word. He's beating the drum, the word he can. And if you talk to him, he will cast this in explicitly theological terms. Some of the things that I just said. There's on the internet. I don't have this included in this presentation, but you can find a video of a conversation between Peter Thiel and N.T. Wright. If you don't know who N.T. Wright is, he's probably the most famous theologian in the Christian tradition today. And he's the real deal. He's a scholar. He's a genuine Christian, not just Christian by name only. And you can find in this interview, it's arranged by, I don't know if it was the Veritas Forum or something else, but it's a conversation between him and Thiel about transhumanism. And Wright is not antagonistic. I mean, he's not going to be agreeing with why Thiel is saying what he's saying. But he understands, because he is a theologian, that it is part of the human destiny to transcend humanity, to become glorified, to become like God. 1 John 3, behold the manner of love the Father has bestowed upon us, that we should be called the sons of God. And that's what we are. And John says, someday we will be like Jesus. Someday we will become like him. It doesn't mean we'll become gods and have our own planets and we'll become Yahwehs, God fathers, like Mormonism. What it means is that we will get new bodies like Jesus had and won't be limited by our humanity. We will become as close to being like Jesus as we can in his relationship to the Father. So Thiel knows all this. This is his tradition. And so he would say things like, well, look, why are you opposing transhumanism? Isn't this what we're supposed to do? Aren't we supposed to become divine? Isn't this what the Genesis creation mandate really had at its core? Aren't we supposed to make Eden happen? With transhumanism and nanotechnology and synthetic biology, we can do things like eliminate disease. We can do things like eliminate genetic defects. Okay? We can do things like reverse, or at least halt, or maybe reverse the aging process. Because really, why most people die because your cells start to die. Okay, there's something in the cell that reaches a point where it starts to deteriorate and die. So, hey, if we can find out why each individual cell does that and stop it, well, you can still get rid of it by a truck. Okay, but you will not age and die. Shouldn't we do that? Isn't that what God wants us to do? This is how he'll frame the debate. And again, he's very much in favor of all this other exploration we're talking about. But what I'm talking about is the modern theological tenet of transcending humanity. And one of the specific forms of that is, or we hope ET helps us, but until we meet our gods, we'll try our best to do that, because that's just what we should do. Now, a lot of people, again, won't put it in theological garb. A lot of people will. A lot of Christians will. Not really asking questions like, well, okay, that's the end of godliness, but does that mean the means that God said this would happen? Is this really the means that God said he'll bring this about? No. But Peter Thiel never seems to ask that question. He assumes the end is addressed in the Bible, but not the means. They're both addressed. They're both there. He skips one and goes to the other. The extraterrestrial gospel, we already have a hint of this. Science fiction and their propaganda blurs the lines between ET and Christian theism and Christology. It's about messaging and not sort of cartoonish nonsense. And lots of space and film and pages have been devoted to this. We have a new Heavenly Father and a new Heavenly Son. And the Heavenly Father is going to be cast as some non-human, God-like figure from some other place. And he's going to have a son, of course. And this gets carried out a lot in film. I just want to get into some films there and start talking about some of these routines. In Close Encounters of the Third Kind, did you ever notice that the Christian minister, in the final scene of the big mothership descends on the top of the mountain there, and they start saying, well, we're going to do an exchange, some of you ETs are going to stay here, and all this stuff, we're going to send some people with you. The Richard Dreyfuss character, of course, gets enthusiastically drafted into this. And there's a minister, as they're going on to the mothership, he reads from Psalm 91:11 before humans, they're actually take off from the ship. And the verse says, "For he will command his angels concerning you to guard you in all your ways." Well, who are the angels? You could say, well, the priest is praying that the angels of God will protect these humans from, on their trip to wherever. Okay. But you could also say that the verse is there to reinforce or plant the idea that the ETs are the angels. They're the ones that will take care of the humans, that they promised to take care of them on their way. Anybody else know where this passage is quoted in the Bible?
Satan.
So he's on the scene. Yeah, Satan's on the scene. Who quotes it? Jesus quotes it to ward off Satan's temptation. And of course, the implication is that he is the one being protected, in the context, which is a real interesting spin if the angels are extraterrestrials. And so if you have in your mind how that passage is actually used in the New Testament, you have, again, this mental connection for it. So, again, that's a bit of an obtuse example. E.T. possesses powers to heal, soar through the heavens. Yet, if you've seen the movie, he has a spiritual connection with the boy Elliot. And of course, E.T. rises from the dead in the movie. Again, these are Christ motifs applied to E.T. This is stuff that divine beings would do, angels or gods or something like that. Day of the Earth Stood Still, in two versions of it. Anybody remember the name of the alien who's actually Klaatu in the alien language? Anybody remember the name of the guy who passes himself off as John Carpenter, abbreviations JCL? The film drops a lot of this kind of subtle stuff, and we call them Easter eggs. They've been doing this for a long time. And if you're familiar with the story, he's a savior figure, and the humans turn on and kill. Again, there are elements of the gospel story, the story of Jesus that put into the baby Earth Stood Still. But, Jesus is swapped out for him. And Superman. Superman in the academic literature is a famous Christ figure. Everybody likes to write about Superman because it's so obvious. And Superman, of course, is an extraterrestrial. Is he not? Now you say, well, let's kind of pressing things a little bit. Here's a scene from the first Superman. This is what he's going to go save the Earth. But he finally gets off of the mothership where he's been in prison. But he does the crucifixion pose. So she goes later in Batman, Superman, he dies. Does anybody not think that Superman's going to rise from the dead? Don't you know the comics? Come on, man. Father and son, with Odin and Thor. Thor, the first movie. What happens to Thor? He dies. It seems. We'll give him credit for death. It's a good death. Saving humanity. That he pops out of it when his father, approves. But his father approves of his selfless act. And the hammer comes back and Thor, okay. Yeah, this is. If you want to go back to the late antiquity, when Christians are trying to evangelize the Nordic territories, Christian missionaries are going to use connections between Odin and Thor to do evangelism. It's called syncretism. I'm not recommending it because it gets you into all sorts of theological trouble later on. But they would do it because there's some similarities here. This is a terrific book. Don't let the covers deceive you. If you're interested in this subject, I highly recommend Our Gods Wear Spandex. It's Christopher Nolan's The Secret History of Comic Book Heroes. And basically, this book is all about how Marvel and DC Comics propel not only different forms of what we would call today the alien narrative. Again, the aliens really are the gods of human beings at all different stages of history. How comic book characters and comic book arcs, mythic arcs in the comic book series, how they put forth that idea, that theology. But Knowles also does get into theology, how comic books do theology, but of course they swap in different characters. They use biblical stories and theological ideas as the beginning point for a lot of their own episodes. They're one stories. It's really a good book. It's Christopher Nolan's. This one is a more academic tome, even though it's a paperback. It's not dense reading. It's pretty easy reading. Gulyas teaches teaches history in the community college. I can't remember where. But Extraterrestrials in the American Zeitgeist, Alien Contact Tales since the 1950s. Again, what he does is he'll go through the contact team sort of era, and he will talk about how he'll give you touch points with science fiction and how science fiction contributed to forming the alien mythos till the 20th century. And if you've ever been in a subject frame out of time when you are, how this sort of happened, how early serials, magazines, comic books, Ray Palmer is a big figure, Jack Kirby from Marvel, how what they wrote actually helped form, they would fill out what we think of today as the alien narrative. And in some cases, it gets very specific. I would recommend, again, you read books by and about Kirby, Ray Palmer. You'll begin to see some striking similarities between stuff they published that sound, I'll just use Roswell for example, that sound suspiciously like the Roswell story before that ever became popular. And people have noticed this. Scholars and other academics have tracked on it. Always curious, how one thing sort of contributes to the other. Is the science fiction writers sort of propelling the narrative, the UFO narrative, or do they get their ideas from the UFO narrative and then write their stories? Well, it's actually a little bit of both. But it's really interesting, again, to actually go through something laid out in academic that makes that case. Knowing, again, if you've never seen this movie, if you're into this sort of subject matter, I would certainly recommend it. I know some people just don't like Nicolas Cage. Don't let that discourage you. This is really a good movie. These guys here you don't know if they're villains or if they're good guys. It's getting into the movie, but the thesis of the movie is that, let's see what I have on the next slide. I'll show that much. The thesis of the movie is that Nicolas Cage's little boy finds at school they buried a time capsule back when Cage was young. And now it hits the 25 year mark or whatever it was. So he takes the kid to school, they're going to pull out the time capsule and see what the little kids, way back when, put in the time capsule. And one of the kids, you see this in flashback in the film, it's a little girl who's obviously disturbed and just we suspect possibly abused. And on the day that they're supposed to draw pictures and stuff to put in the time capsule, this little girl is sitting in the back of the room and drawing nothing but numbers, row after row after row after row of numbers, and the teacher just kind of freaks out. Tries to stop her from doing it, finally takes the paper away, they put it in the time capsule. Cage's kid is, they pull the time capsule out, every kid gets an envelope. Of course, Cage's kid gets the one with the numbers. And Cage is an atheistic astrophysicist, but he stumbles on the discovery that these numbers correspond to dates of tragic events, catastrophic events, and the body counts for each one. So he spends a whole night in Google tracking all of that, gets freaked out. And ultimately the story is religious because the last date doesn't really have a number, it has EE on it, which means they find out everybody else is going to die. So it's actually a prophecy of the apocalypse. And the imagery of Ezekiel, in this case, includes the book of Revelation. Revelation repurposes the book of Ezekiel, Ezekiel's vision, Revelation 4 and 5 for those who aren't familiar with that. Becomes a prominent element in the story. So that by the end, I would have had to have shown you part of the movie, but there's this sort of fantastic vision at the end where you have a recreation of what the filmmaker thought Ezekiel's wheel chariot thing would have looked like. And of course, it's populated by extraterrestrials. Then they come to take the little boy and he makes a friend along the way to this girl to an elite, and everybody else dies. So it's a direct link with biblical prophecy, biblical imagery associated with angels, God, the divine throne with extraterrestrials. It's very explicit. And, I don't want to be exaggerating here. I like watching this. This is a good movie. It has high entertainment value. And I sat there at the end and I thought, you know, if I was a filmmaker and I was thinking about, creating imagery for Ezekiel 1, that's the way I do it. It's actually very striking the way they do it. They really put some thought into it. But it's just overt messaging. It's theological messaging. Again, they're here to save us from ourselves, save us from oblivion. In this case, the culprit is not global warming. It has something to do with the solar flare. 2001, of course, famous Space Odyssey. Again, at the end of the movie, Dave evolves into a cosmic human. I don't know how else you really put it. But of course, the pictures of Dave being reborn as a baby, but yet with these adult features, drifting out into space, they're quite famous. It's a very clear and overt casting the theological idea of human evolution transcending humanity and Earth itself and becoming a cosmic being. Arthur C. Clarke in 3001, see, now they rewards the galaxy and can row them no along the stars. That's human destiny in Clarke's version. It's just a classic point of ET theology, ET salvation. I just want to give some superheroes, and it's just real fast and unfortunately kind of superficial. Have you noticed that your superheroes are one of two things? They're either aliens, extraterrestrials, or humans, or they are enhanced humans. Okay? They use some kind of technology. Now, the Vision in Marvel is essentially human consciousness married to technological wonder. So he's kind of a party upon a hybrid. Captain America, enhanced human. Iron Man is an enhanced human. The Hulk is an enhanced human. Nothing likes it, but yeah. No gamma ray thing. Spider-Man is an enhanced human. X-Men, they're mutants. That's what they are. There's something more to see. I think this is the end, but I want to end with Prometheus. Prometheus, of course, is the prequel to the Alien series. And this is, again, extraordinarily overt. It would have been more overt in its recasting Christian theology into an extraterrestrial religion had Ridley Scott's original script been the focal point of the actual film. So if you remember the movie, these are, let me remember the name, these are the engineers. These are the creators. And one of the engineers sacrifices himself to drink something, and his body deteriorates, his DNA goes into the mix that is on the new Earth. This virgin planet that doesn't have life. Here's the scene. And his DNA eventually evolves into us, human beings. They are our creators in the story. Eventually, again, humans will get this alien messaging, this a lot of the plot, but they travel back to the place where the engineers come from, and they encounter them. And of course, it's kind of interesting. The engineers turn out to be giants. So that's kind of an interesting twist. They're divine beings. They're also giants, so they're mixing the Genesis 6 stuff in there. To understand the rest of what I'm going to show you here, the Prometheus myth from Greek mythology. Prometheus is a type, and he is a trickster type, a trickster figure, credited with creating man from clay. He's also referred to as the divine gardener, again, from the heavens, or in this case, from space. In the movie, the engineers look smooth like white clay. Going back here, that's intentional. Our DNA comes from theirs. And Prometheus defies the gods by giving fire to humanity in the Greek myth. This gift enabled civilization progress. Prometheus is known as the champion of humanity, and he's sentenced to eternal torment by Zeus. So he's bound every day. An evil comes and rips out his liver, and heals, only to have it happen all again in the same day. That's his torture. And it comes to fever, liver grows back, and you can see the next day. Now, we skip ahead, and there's the image right there. This is hard to see, and I'm not going to give you a website that would actually get a better view of this. But here is the Prometheus figure, and this is one of the engineers. You can see the human form here. and he's got his side torn open here. And it's really hard to see, but the one that tears at it is one of the aliens or from the Alien movie. So you have to think a little bit abstractly here. You know, the giver of human life having his abdomen torn open. He's a dying God. It's obvious Jesus, the Spirit aside, the creator redeemer, giving his life for humanity. And of course, keeping the devil at bay, which is the alien savior. But if you go to movies.com, and you know, there's a few other sites. There's one I'll just spell it for you. It's a blog by a guy that goes by the name Cavillor, Cavillor. He has a long, sort of alien Gnostic theological expose in this movie. It's actually quite interesting. If you've seen the movie, the main character is a female. She's a redhead. Her name is Elizabeth. So we say by her Elizabeth. No, and there's a barrier name in the film as well, which are associated with her. She ends up being impregnated with the alien. She performs a cesarean birth on herself. I'm not going to tell you how she does that. But of course, the alien's birth. Again, there's all sorts of like mixed biblical images in this, but the real kicker never made it in the film. If you go up to movies.com, they're interviewing Ridley Scott, and they say, "We heard of the script, but the engineers were targeting our planet for destruction because we had crucified one of them, one of their representatives, and that Jesus Christ might have been alien. Was that ever considered?" And Ridley Scott's response, "We definitely did. And then we thought that it was a little too on the nose. But if you look at it as our children are misbehaving down in Samaria, there are moments where it looks like we've gone out of control, running around armor and skirts, which of course in the Roman Empire, they were given a long run 1,000 years before disintegration actually started to happen. And then you say, well, let's send out one of our emissaries to see if we can stop it. Guess what? They crucified. So this is where Scott wanted to go in the movie. In Prometheus. We'll stop there. If you want the slide presentation, this is the URL. Get it. Just a few sort of closing comments. Movies like Prometheus, movies like 2001, they're the most well-known, knowing, the most overt. So it's an example. It's really hard. It's really hard to find a science fiction movie or a superhero movie that does not do theology. We had Guardians of the Galaxy, which I love. It's the second one. Everybody see Guardians too? Okay, do you remember how it ends with that advanced race? You're getting ticked off because they didn't get the Guardians. And so they're going to make sort of a super version of themselves. What do they call it? What does she say? What's the last line of the movie? I think Lil Paul here. Adam. That's going to be Adam Warlock, if you're familiar with the comic book material, who is a Christ figure. Go Google it. Look it up on Wikipedia, Adam Warlock. If you know the comic book stories and the arcs, it's all theology. And again, the comic books, the movies, we didn't really get into TV shows here. They retell biblical stories and biblical theology through their characters. Now you could say, well, maybe they do that because those are just good stories. It's good storytelling. And it is. It's compelling storytelling. But it's hard to believe that, again, over and over and over again, especially when you read something like this, reading Scott interview, that there's not some intentionality behind it. And when I say that, I'm not saying, oh, you're saying that all just hate Christians. No, I'm not saying that at all. I guess you got some of those people, okay, whatever. What I'm saying is that intentionally or unintentionally, it gets masses of people, millions and millions and millions of people, to think about God and Jesus and humanity and human destiny and salvation, the major core elements of theology. It gets them to think about all those things in a different way. And in such a way that erases God, Jesus, it erases all those things. It completely redefines them. And that just, it becomes part of the way people process the biblical message. And trust me, folks, sometimes it helps, but often it doesn't. When you try to talk to people about spiritual things, we're already in a post-Christian culture. I don't have any qualms about saying that. And you can be sit there and be careful about that. I'm actually not. I won't lapse into this, but for a number of reasons, I think it's a good thing. I think it's a really good thing. But the fact of the matter is, you have to realize that when you try to have a spiritual conversation with people, they're not parsing terms like you parse them. And in some cases, they may not even be capable of that. You're going to have to sort of get into this world and how this world trains people to think about big theological concepts. You're going to have to be able to interact with that with a lot of people, just help them see, yeah, there's similarities here, and that might build a bridge to the discussion, but there are significant disconnections here that you're ultimately going to have to address. That's all I have for today. If you have any questions, I don't know how Rag wants to wrap up here. Anybody? And if you're interested in this, I really recommend Our Gods Wear Spandex. There are other books in this genre, subgenre, if you can call it that. But that's really, it's very readable. Good examples, lots of illustrations. It's really quite good. And then Robbie Graham's Silver Screen Saucer, I think, just for the general Hollywood UFO science fiction. Anybody at all? All right, thank you for coming.